Hello world. Today's video is a quick video on how to automate any plugin or VST inside of FL Studio. This could include stuff like the pitch of your auto-tune as the song goes on, or the preset you're using in Grossbeat, and basically everything in between. There's three methods we're going to be going over. The first one being the most basic, and the third one being the most advanced. And then I'm going to go ahead and give you an example of each as we go along. The first method is probably the most well-known method, and it is simply to head into any plugin and use the dry or wet knob to control the mix of that plugin. And what you're going to do is just right click on the side of the plugin and hit create automation clip. And then it'll give you a automation clip like this inside of the playlist, which you can control and move back and forth into whatever shape you want. The top of the automation is going to be 100% wetness, and the bottom of the automation is going to be 0% wetness or 100% dry. You can also adjust how the automation is quantized in the upper left here with the magnet tool. So if you want to have more specific automations, you can use 1/6 step or none. And then if you want it to be locked onto the beat, you can set it to beat here. I'll give you an example of a few different things here that it's super easy to automate and that I've automated inside of this beat. The first thing I'm going to show you the automations for is just the basic wet and dryness on this Parametric EQ, Shaper Box, and Fruity Panomatic for this 808 here. As you can see, I automated the way the Shaper Box came in so that it only comes in during the last bar here. And then I also automated the Fruity Panomatic so it slowly decreases. And I automated the Parametric EQ so it turns off here right at the end. Automations are vital for adding movement to your song, and that's exactly what we did here. Using the same concept, we can also automate the inside of any of the plugins that are stock inside of FL Studio and a lot of other plugins as well. But the ones that I've noticed it works almost every single time is within the FL Studio ones. So for instance, this knob right here, which controls the movement of band 7 on this Parametric EQ, you can right click that and create an automation clip. And that's exactly what we did here in this example, so that basically it automates the Parametric EQ, bringing in the high end frequencies as the song goes on. So that's the most basic version of automation, and that'll work on the dry and wet knob of any plugin. It'll also work on a lot of the inner knobs inside of most stock plugins, as well as many other plugins. There's a few instances where you're going to want to get more specific with what you're automating inside of FL Studio. So let's say you're using a plugin like Serum, where you can't right-click automate on any of these knobs here because they're inside of Serum. So basically, this will work with any knob inside of any plugin, and it doesn't have to be a stock FL plugin. This will work with any plugin. All you have to do is move the knob left or right, and then head up to the upper left, go to Tools, Last Tweaked, and create automation clip. So as you can see, I just created an automation clip for that fill cutoff. So now if I move that back and forth, we can go back into Serum and see that it automated that. As you can see there with the cutoff. And let's say you were actually trying to get something that you liked out of that, you just get like weird with it a little bit, you know? You know what I mean? Just experimenting and figuring out what knobs. Basically, you can automate anything you want with this. That's just one example of that type of automation. Another example is something like Valhalla Vintage Verb. If you right click here, you're not going to see the option to create automation clip, but it works in the same exact way where if you just move it left and right, you go to Tool, Last Tweaked, create automation clip. Now you have Valhalla Vintage Verb Decay on automation. And that will take care of a large chunk of other plugins that you don't have automations for. Before I go on to the third version of automation, I'm just going to give you guys a quick preview of this beat, and then we're going to hop into the song that uses it so I can show you the third version of automation, which will allow you to control automations inside of stuff that doesn't even have a knob and allow you to automate stuff during a song regardless of how the plugin is set up.
Stranded in a digital space, so I couldn't embrace you. Starting your canvas in MS Paint, but I wouldn't erase erase you. And I'm running out of drives I can save too. Had to make clean, look through a screen to try, but I can't break through.
I can't, feels like the connection isn't ending. Aim chat open, but the message isn't sending. There's a virus and it's running through my engine, and says my system needs immediate attention. Let's say you're using something like Parametric EQ, but you don't want to automate one of the knobs. You actually want to automate the movement of one of these bands by hand. There's an easy way to do that as well. And that doesn't just work with the bands on a Parametric EQ. It'll work with any of the plugins that involve more controlled movement like that. Like, for instance, something like Gross Beat, where you have to click and move around the different presets. Or something like Effector, where the plugin's working in 3D and you want to have full control of the automation instead of just using knobs. What you're going to do in a situation like this, and I'm going to use this Parametric EQ as the easiest example. You're going to go ahead and make a new pattern. And then this is an optional step, but name that pattern. And I'm going to go ahead with something like automation for EQ. That's like really not specific enough, but whatever. I've named things worse. And then I'm going to leave it off because I don't actually want you guys to hear this automation, but I'll show you that it's working afterwards. So you will click record and then select notes and automation.
Stranded in a digital space, so I couldn't embrace you. Starting new canvas at MS Paint, but I wouldn't erase you. And I'm running out of drives I can save too. Had to make clean, look through a screen to try, but I can't break through.
I can't, feels like the connection isn't ending. Aim chat open, but the message isn't sending. There's a virus and it's running. As you can see in the pattern here, this is what the automation looks like. And it recorded all of these automations. And then we can play that back and take a look at the Parametric EQ, and you'll see.
In a digital space, so I couldn't embrace you. Starting new canvas at MS Paint, but I wouldn't erase you. And I'm running out of drives I can save too. To make clean, look through a screen to try, but I can't break through.
I can't. Obviously, that's not something you would actually want to do, but as you can see, the automation worked, and there's many different things you would want to do with that. Like, say you're too lazy to sidechain your own dynamic EQ. You could EQ vocals in a separate way that way, or you could mess around with EQs in many different ways that way. Now let's look at something that's a little more practical as to what somebody would actually do. We're going to throw a gross beat on there, and then we're going to create, then we're going to rename this gross beat automation, and we're going to automate the way that the gross beat affects the overall beat. And this time we're going to use it on so we can hear what it's doing. And one of the things with gross beat, a little bit unrelated, but you want to make sure you're on a solid beat. Otherwise, it's going to come in weird. So we're going to pop it in right here. Record, notes, and automation, and go.
Stranded in a digital space, so I couldn't embrace you. Starting new MS Paint, but I wouldn't erase you. And I'm running out of drives I can save. Had to make clean, look through a screen to try, but I get through.
I can't, like the connection isn't ending. Aim chat open, but the message isn't sending. There's a virus here out running through my engine, and says my system needs immediate.
I'm in the matrix, I don't have my body. It's just Wednesday.
So as you can see, it recorded those automations. And the cool part about this too is, like, I didn't like many of those automations. There's a lot of experimenting going on. So you can erase all of these. And then the one at the end was kind of cool, right? So we can check out the way that it left the one there in the end. Shorten it like that. There's a virus and it's running through my engine, and says my system needs immediate.
I'm in the matrix, I don't have my body.
So it's another way that you can record automations, and that's definitely the way that's going to give you the most control. And I'm going to give you guys one last example of using that feature. And this time we're going to use something more 3D like Effector, so you can really see how you can move around and completely control it however you'd like. We're going to use stereo as the example, and it's basically going to give you a stereo space that you can move it around in, and you could do this with any of these effects. And this will work with any type of 3D plugin that gives you this full kind of X and Y motion. And this will give you a quick example of that. We're going to go record, notes, and automations, and try it out.
When I'm here though, search for resonance when I can see or hear though.
I can't hear but I can tell, not the same as living cells. Sending texts like casting spells, I just miss my IRLs. You can't can't know everything, I keep it to myself. I can't stop thinking of you, hoping you can help. I was hope. So as you can see, it recorded that automation, and when we play it back,
when I'm here though, search for resonance when I can see right here though.
I can hear it, I can tell. Not the same as living cells. Sending texts like casting spells. I just miss my IRLs. You can't know everything, I keep it to myself. I can't. So basically, that gives you full control of automation inside of FL Studio, and using those 3 methods, you'll be able to automate anything that you want. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope it helped you guys. If you want any more tutorials, you can check out my channel. I have a playlist that'll be linked that'll show you some more of my tutorials. And I'll also have my beats listed if you guys are looking for some hyperpop beats. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. So much love and peace out.
In a digital space, so I couldn't embrace you. Start a new canvas in MS Paint, but I wouldn't erase you. And I'm running out of drives I can save to. Had to make clean, look to a screen, I try, but I can't break through.
I can't, feels like the connection isn't ending. Aim chat, open, but the message is inside.